All right, everyone. My name is Eric Lee. I am along with Cindy Goldberg. Quickly, I'll introduce myself. I have been here at Golden Gate University as a full-time instructor for 9 years in the Masters of Tax program. I was an adjunct instructor for 13 years before that. And before that, I was a student here getting a master's in taxation. So in addition to an alumni, and I can talk to you perspective of what it's like to take classes here, especially taking classes while I worked full-time at KPMG and Deloitte for up to 20 years. It was about 20 years. That I can also talk about it from being in the front of the classroom as an instructor, teaching both in person, over Zoom, and asynchronously. So more about all that later, but I want to let Cindy introduce herself. I think many of you know her.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Cindy Goldberg, and I'm the Director of Admissions Counseling and Enrollment at Golden Gate University. I joined Golden Gate back in 2019. I had been a practicing attorney for about 30 years. In the last 10 years, I've been in higher education working with graduate students primarily in tax. So I love the topic. I love talking to students and prospective students about it. I work with students from the moment of inquiry all the way through the admissions application process and through initial registration. So I do hope to have the opportunity to work with many of you. Thank you.
I'm gonna like to welcome Shada, I believe, to the.
That's actually Sammy.
Oh, that's Sammy. Okay.
Yes, her name's Sammy.
Welcome, Sammy. Sammy, if you can, you might want to go on mute just in case there's any background noise. We will have a Q&A in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the presentation. So I want to. And again, you will have access to these slides. All right. Let's start off by talking about why GGU, because anytime I'm asked to talk to any audience, I always want to put myself in your guys' shoes. And if I was in your shoes, the number one thing I'd want to know is what distinguishes GGU, because you certainly have an option if you want to get a master's in tax. There's a lot of universities offer that. And not only from my own experience as a student, but after talking to many students and alumni, I kind of narrowed out some of the key distinguishing factors. And the number one thing is the classroom experience. It's small, it's personal, no shade to my alma mater at UC Berkeley as an undergrad, but I was in a class in an auditorium of like 200 students. I think the average size for our required classes is somewhere around 14 to 15, and it is very rare that a class size exceeds 25. So what does that mean? That means you actually get to know not only your professor, but you get to know your fellow students in the class, which I found as a real difference maker to my actual experience, that the classes being small and personal, they were far more engaging, and you get a chance to interact with such a diverse population of students. And when I talk about diversity in the population of students, I'm talking mostly based on experience, meaning you can have students that have very little tax experience. You can have fellow students that work with the IRS, or I had a lot of experience in public accounting or running their own firms. And because you have this diversity of background of experience, it results into a very rich discussion in the classroom, because you have people with different perspectives that have different questions or different experience to bring to the classroom. Applicability to the material of the real world, that is huge. As a student, I really wanted to make sure if I was going to spend 2.5 hours after working 8 hours of at my normal job that I wanted to know the material that I was learning was going to be absolutely applicable to the real world, that I could utilize the skills I learned in class and apply it to real tax clients. And that's what our program, I think, really excels at. We don't use a textbook. Instead, our textbook, so to speak, is the Internal Revenue Code and the regulations and case law. So what that means is that you're going to learn from the actual authority that people use and work with in the real world. And you get really good at reading and interpreting the code, the regs, and case law. Another distinguishing factor is we have a strong relationship with the accounting firms, which means a lot of our students are from the different accounting firms. A lot of our adjunct faculty are from the accounting firms, and we have a strong recruiting network who hire our students at these accounting firms. And you might go, well, why is it so important to have a good relationship with the accounting firms? I think it's great because people working in public accounting, myself for 20 years, have such a good breadth and depth of technical knowledge because they're not working just in one corporate entity's tax compliance and tax consulting, which would likely be specific to a certain set of tax issues. Instead, they're dealing with issues from a diversity of clients. And I think that makes you a better and well-rounded tax professional. The other distinguishing factor that I want to point out without sounding too biased or tapping my own back is experienced industry leading faculty. I have 20 years of experience in the real world and over 20 years of teaching experience. And of the full-time faculty, I have the least experience, right? So while our faculty, our full-time faculty have a ton of great teaching and real world experience, and our adjunct faculty are great as well because they're the ones that are currently working in the field, bringing the latest of information to the classroom. I'm going to talk about the graduate tax offerings, but I really strongly believe people who get a master's of tax at Golden Gate have not only a nice breadth of tax technical material that they will bring home, but a real depth of understanding. And finally, our ranking. Anytime anyone tells you they are highly ranked, I have two questions for them. Who does the ranking and what criteria were they using in order to rank you? And so that means, to me, taxtalent.com is the one that I'm most proud of our ranking. Now, taxtalent.com doesn't do their ranking anymore, but for the last 4 years that they did it, we were ranked in the top 5 all of the 4 times, and in 2 of the 4 times we were ranked number 1. And they're an independent organization, and they do a ranking based on feedback that they get from over like 300 tax recruiters from all over the nation who do their own ranking of where they want to recruit students from what master's of tax program. So if you're ever interested in learning more about it, you can certainly go to taxtalent.com. But that's just one of the different rankings that I think I'm really proud of. Washington Monthly does their own ranking for adult learners that we've ranked number 1 for the last 4 years. All right, so these things, if you look at the first letter of these bullet points, spell out a really important word. It spells out the acronym career. And to me, that's why I came to Golden Gate. I came to Golden Gate because literally managers and partners came to me back then. I was an experienced staff and said, Eric, if you want a long-term career in taxation, whether it's here or elsewhere, you need to improve on just your undergraduate in accounting that I had. You need to get a master's in taxation. And I found that that really was the case over time, that it really did help me in my career as far as the tax technical material that I learned. All right, where do our alumni work? Not surprisingly, I've talked a lot about public accounting today. The large public accounting firms are well represented. The bigger the circle, the more alumni we have. So KPMG, EY, Deloitte, and PwC. But we also have students, our alumni, who are currently working at smaller firms. You see Moss Adams here, a BPM here, Frank Riverman here. and as well as corporate. See, Cisco is represented, Wells Fargo, and then finally, I believe on here should be the Internal Revenue Service, because I know we have some folks there as well. All right. So I said that I was going to talk about our course offerings. So let's go through this. So let's take a step back. If you get a master's in tax at Golden Gate, you're going to take 10 classes, and each of the classes are 3 units. So think 30 units, 10 classes. And of those 10 classes and 30 units, 7 of the classes and 21 of the units are required classes. And those are the 3. So you kind of read this slide from the bottom up. So it starts at the bottom. So your first 2 classes are required classes, and they are your foundational skills classes. That's tax research and individuals. I personally think, and I'm unbiased because I don't teach tax research. I think tax research is the most valuable class in our program, and it's the first class that you take. Why? Well, if you imagine all the Harry Potter books and combine all that, that doesn't make up half the size of the Internal Revenue Code. So the Revenue Code is long and covers a lot of stuff. And then you have the regulations, which interprets the code, which is just as long. Plus you have revenue rulings and revenue procedures issued by the IRS, and you have a ton of case law. No one person can possibly know a small fraction of all that information. So what separates the really strong tax advisors from the average or weaker ones is how do you effectively and efficiently, because efficiency is so important in the real world, research all that information in order to give the correct answer to your client or to your own tax situation. And that's what tax research is all about. The second part of the tax research is not only do they teach you how to research, but how to document that research, whether it's a letter to the file, whether it's a letter to the client, which is more layman's language, or a protest letter to the IRS, which is very technical. You'll learn how to document that research in a variety of different ways. I teach the individuals course. It's also known as advanced federal taxation, but basically that teaches you how to take individual facts and circumstances that affect individuals and how to apply the law to figure out the answer to those specific issues and challenges. Tax operating rules classes, you're ready for those 3 courses after you do the 2 foundational skills classes. That's property transactions, the character of transactions, meaning is it going to be ordinary income? Is it going to be capital gain? And what are the ramifications of that? Tax timing, when do you recognize income? When do you get to take a deduction? And federal tax procedure, what are all the rules in dealing with the IRS? If you're being audited, what can they ask for? What can they not ask for? If you disagree with a finding of an audit, what are your rights as the taxpayer? I don't think you can properly be a tax advisor in dealing with the IRS in any issues without knowing federal tax procedure. And then finally, the last 2 required classes is deep dives into corporations and partnerships. So after you have those 7 classes, you have 3 electives to pick from for classes that you think that you will be utilizing in the real world. That's what students always ask me, what's the best electives to take? The best electives to take are the electives that you're going to be able to apply in the real world within a short amount of time after taking the class. So it depends on what your client base is. If you have a lot of individuals, you probably want to take estate planning or trust and estate. If you are like me and worked on a lot of large corporations that do business across state lines and internationally, a state and local tax class is really good, and an international tax class. I took the Principles of International Tax class, really good course. It covers all the basics for both inbound and outbound. Inbound is foreign individuals or entities that are doing business in the United States. Outbound is U.S. individuals or entities that are doing business abroad. Another popular course is mergers and acquisitions, if that's something that you are interested in or your client base deals with. That's a great class. Another class which I think is super popular with our students is choice of entity. So it breaks down the pros and cons to setting up a structure, an entity as a corporation or as LLC or as a partnership or as a sole proprietorship, and compares and contrasts that. So these are some of our popular electives. That wasn't an exhaustive list, but it gives you a little flavor of the different classes. Kind of the gold standard is the Master's in Taxation, a 10-course program, like I mentioned. But if you're interested in a shorter program, where the Master's of Tax is 30 units, we offer certificates which are shorter, which are 15 units or less. There's a certificate in taxation. It's kind of like a mini Master's in Taxation. So, so that's an option. We do have students who decide they want to get a Master's in Taxation and later decide, you know what, I only want a certificate in taxation. And I've had students who seek a certificate in taxation and they realize, no. I want to proceed and continue to use the courses that I have taken to get a Master's in Taxation. There are also more specialized certificates, which is, for example, a certificate in estate planning. So if you work purely in high net worth individuals, you want to do that. A certificate in international taxation. It starts with that principles of taxation class that I talked about, but then goes a lot further with more in-depth classes. For example, a class that's purely in inbound or purely in outbound, and as well as a certificate in state and local taxation. Now, one thing I need to note, if you're looking at one of those three certificates at the bottom, estate planning, international taxation, and state and local taxation, and you're thinking, oh, that's 12 units or 15 units, those are only 4 or 5 classes I have to take. You do have prerequisites that have to be satisfied. For example, if you haven't taken the equivalent of a tax research class or the advanced federal class, that might be a prerequisite for some of the classes in those programs. All right. I haven't talked about the mode and how we deliver classes. A number of you are not in the Bay Area, so you likely will not be attending classes on our San Francisco campus. No problem. There are actually 2 different alternatives if you do not want to physically attend our San Francisco or LA campus, or excuse me, San Francisco or Seattle campus, right, Cindy? Do we? In that situation, you can choose to take a class, a course, through asynchronous online, or what you're experiencing right now, web conference meeting over Zoom. So let me break down those different options. So let's talk first about taking a class asynchronously. What that means is there's no set specific day and time where you have to commit to attending a class. Now, that said, I always cringe when any student or any prospective student talks about asynchronous classes being self-learning. It is not. It is very structured, and there is a significant commitment of time that you have to make every week in your asynchronous class. But there's a lot of flexibility for when you do that. So let's take you through a typical week in an asynchronous course. So the week will begin with the instructor posting, if you look to your right, the learning objectives and the assignment that they want you to do during the week. The assignment usually encompasses a certain amount of reading, whether that's code, regs, or case law, and then usually some type of problems that you need to work out in a problem set. Then they'll post some type of lecture video, either in the form of a video or a narrated PowerPoint. When I post my lecture note in an asynchronous class, a lecture video, it's very similar to the lecture component that I would have in a synchronous class. And then what's unique to a asynchronous class is you have discussion forums, and that's where the magic occurs. So I tell students that in an asynchronous class, you don't have a 2-hour and 40-minute class that you would have in a synchronous class that meets at a day and time. Instead, I want you to allocate what would have been 2.5 hours over 5 days, 30 minutes a day. And that 30 minutes a day for 5 days in the asynchronous class is spent participating in the discussion forums. The nice thing is when you spend that half hour in each of those 5 days, it's completely up to you. It could be the first thing in the morning, it could be middle of the day, it could be in the middle of the night, whatever works best for your schedule. It's very flexible. So here's an example of a discussion forum section that's ripped right out of my advanced federal class, right? So, and kind of ripped from the headlines. You can see a whole bunch of YouTube videos about, hey, I gave a waitress a $5,000 tip. So a customer gives a waitress a $5,000 tip. Well, the question is that $5,000 taxable? You learn in advanced federal that tips are absolutely includable in the income. They're taxable. But a gift is not, as you guys hopefully can appreciate. For your birthday and Christmas, you shouldn't be reporting your presents, your gifts that you get. But the question is that $5,000 that a customer gives to a waitress, is that a gift or is that a tip? And that's what the question I ask my students. If Mary gets $5,000 on a $25 bill, how is she supposed to treat that $5,000? So that gets posted, as you see, on Sunday. And then on Monday, a student responds. They took the position here, this student, that this is an actual student that wrote, hey, the $5,000 is not income. It is not compensating for services. And then they're giving their authority by citing this case. And then I go in there on Monday and I make a statement. Thanks for getting it started. It's an interesting question. And you're asserting that given the size of the amount makes it not be a tip. It makes it be a gift. And I asked the rest of the class, do you agree with that analysis? And that opens it up. And then another person would come in and they would give their opinion. And the discussion continues throughout the week. It's neat when you have an engaged class and an engaged instructor, which is what I always am striving, and I set the gradings to incentivize people to be very active. I actually think the discussion that can happen on an asynchronous class can actually be better than in a synchronous class. Because a synchronous class, you have a very short, limited amount of time to have the discussion before you have to go on to the next item. All right, so I hope that gives you an idea a little bit of the way an asynchronous class is. After the discussion section, usually the problems or solutions get released, so you can find out what the final answer is. And then sometimes the instructor will set up an assessment, like a quiz or something, so you kind of can test your knowledge of whether you've mastered the concepts. I love doing that because not only is it for the students to assess their knowledge, but it helps me assess how the class as a total has mastered the concept. If the class as a group bombs the quiz, I may need to go back and review the material because maybe it didn't get the concepts didn't come through. All right, that's an asynchronous class. The web conference class is exactly what you're experiencing now. Over Zoom, I'm lecturing to you. Honestly, it would be more interactive. I'm kind of doing all the lecturing. If there's a class, I would be asking you guys a lot of questions, and we would be taking breaks to work out homework problems. But you get a flavor of what is like. You also can do polling in Zoom, which I think is really effective as well. And you could have a class where everybody's on Zoom, or you could have a mixture. We have a technology to have some students that might be physically in the class and some students would be over Zoom. The important thing to note is that you have the flexibility each semester to decide what type of class that you want to sign up for. Every semester, all of our required classes are offered an option synchronous and an option asynchronous. So they're different sections. So you can choose the section that fits your learning style and your work life that works best. Personally, as a student, I would enjoy synchronous learning more. It just fits my own learning style. But I can tell you there are people who have taken asynchronous classes who tell me I love that more. So it's one is not better than the other. It's just whatever fits your learning style more. One thing that I kind of made a bold statement at the beginning, I say what distinguishes GGU is the acronym career. It enhances your career. It helps your career. Well, obviously, to the extent that you more learn technical tax material, and I hope that I've shown you that through all the course offerings, you not only get a breadth of knowledge, but a depth of knowledge that you can take to the real world. But beyond our courses, we have resources and professional events that can really help your career and help your networking. In the fall, we offer some lunch and learn workshops, which are geared. There are a lot of networking skills and resume writing and cover letter writing and interview skills workshops that people find helpful. I do have students who say, Eric, I already have a job and I'm doing great. Well, statistically, especially in tax, you're going to have a lot of different jobs in your career. So learning these skills, updating your resume, making sure your resume is good for whenever you do start looking for a job, I think are skills that are really valuable that all our students can benefit from. We often have different industry panels and speakers. In the fall, we do a monster career fair. We have, gosh, Cindy, do you remember how many companies come to our career fair? I want to say at least 30.
It's between 30 and 35, yeah.
Yeah. So what is so cool about our career fair and our lunch and learn workshops is we currently offer those virtually. So you can potentially attend those virtually if that's something that you want. And a lot of our workshops and speaker events are recorded. So if you don't want to attend in real time because you can watch the recordings. All right, let me talk a little bit about our student services that we offer. So one thing to note, all of the information on this slide, all of your support services and all of the professional events are free, or to put it another way, it is included already in your tuition. There's no additional cost. So one of the great things about GGU is you are assigned an advisor. So you should never have a question of, or if you have the question of, how many classes should I take? What order should I take my classes? Your advisor can help you with those type of questions. You might say, I'm looking at the schedule and I can see what's offered next term, but what's going to be offered in the term after that, and the term after that? Your advisor usually has a pretty good handle of when we offer electives. Required classes are easy. Like I said, they're offered every term, both asynchronously and synchronously. But our electives are not offered every term, all electives. So there's a little bit of planning involved of figuring out, okay, I'm interested in these electives. When are those electives usually offered in which terms? I want to shout out our faculty members are here for you to the extent that you have questions. I set up review sessions near the exams because that's when students have a lot of questions, but I also am available by appointment at any time during the semester to jump onto Zoom and help students to the extent that they're struggling with the material. That said, we also make available to you tax and accounting tutors. These are alumni. These are people who have completed the program. So if you just need additional help, they are available via Zoom to help you. Not going to go through everything on here, but I just will shout out that we have disability services. So to the extent that you have any type of disability and you need any accommodations. For example, I had a student, unfortunately, who had a skiing accident and he hurt his back, and he couldn't physically sit down for 2.5 hours straight. So they set up an accommodation to take the exam through disability services in recognition of his current disability. So you have issues like that. We have a team that is set up to make sure you're properly accommodated. All righty, so those are our support services. The one I did not talk about, which I'm very proud of, is our Career Center. So again, even if you currently have a job, the Career Center is awesome. They can meet with you, look at your resume, look at your cover letter, do practice interviews with you. They also they post all of the active job sites, and they are very familiar with the firms that regularly are looking to hire our students. They also have a portal which houses a whole bunch of workshops and webinars, which are recorded, so you can watch them just in time. If you want to work on an elevator speech, if you want to practice behavioral interviewing, what are the tips to succeed in that? I mean, there's just tons and tons of resources that are online for you in the Career Center. All righty. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, who will talk about the application process.
Thanks, Eric. And I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I will, I'll just sort of briefly address the application and admission process for you. And then if you have specific questions, again, you always are free to reach out to me directly, and we can sort of help you navigate through that process. And for those of you who joined the webinar just a little bit later, I just want to let you know that you will be receiving a link to this webinar info session along with the slides that you're seeing today. So again, there's no need to take notes or anything. You can just listen and then feel free to ask questions as soon as we wrap it up here. So applying to Golden Gate is a very straightforward process, whether you're applying to the formal Master's in Taxation program, one of our certificate programs, or for what we call open enrollment. I'm going to address the Master's in Taxation program first. In addition to the online application, which can be found at ggu.edu/apply, we request all applicants to submit an official transcript. And by official transcript, we mean that transcript needs to come from your undergraduate degree conferring institution directly to us. The nice thing about it now is, as you go through our application process, there will be a question for you about whether or not you would like to authorize Golden Gate to order those transcripts for you. And if you mark yes, we will go ahead and order that transcript for you, provided that we can, and we'll also pay for the fee to do that. And we do that for up to 2 transcripts. So if you also have a postgraduate transcript that you'd like to include, and we will take care of both of those for you. When applying to our programs, we do look for a minimum GPA, undergraduate GPA of a 3.0 or higher. If you don't have at least a 3.0 cumulative GPA in your undergraduate program, I tell students, don't just dismiss applying to Golden Gate. To the contrary, we encourage you to apply. There are always various reasons why somebody may have struggled a bit in pursuing their undergraduate degree. So what we do, in addition to requiring students whose GPA is below 3.0, is we ask you to also submit a professional resume, and then what we refer to as a statement of purpose. And in that statement of purpose, we give you the opportunity to tell us briefly the circumstances that you believe may have contributed to that lower GPA, what has changed, and why you're ready to come back to school, and how you plan to succeed in our program. So again, if your GPA is below a 3.0, please don't be discouraged. Again, we do encourage you to apply. You just need to submit the additional supplemental information to us. We do not require a GMAT or a GRE. So it's just your application and your transcript. And then if your GPA is below a 3.0, the statement of purpose and the resume. For international students, same requirements, other than we also do require that you satisfy the English language proficiency requirement. So if you are a non-native English speaker, we do ask you to submit your TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo scores. In lieu of that, there are other ways that you can satisfy the English language proficiency requirement. For example, if you got a degree from an English-speaking institution in an English-speaking country, that would certainly satisfy the language proficiency for us as well. Or if you work for an English-speaking company for a period of years. So there are nuances and exceptions to just taking, just providing us with exam scores. And so again, I work very closely with applicants to determine the best way to make sure that you have complied with all of the application requirements. Next slide. So after you've gone through the application submission and you're looking at tuition payment, just to sort of break it down for you very basically, and I'm a lawyer, I do not like math, but thank you, Braden School of Tax, you've made the math very easy for me. So currently we charge $1,250 per credit. All of our tax classes are 3 credits. So every class is $3,750. And as Eric mentioned earlier, there are 10 classes in the formal degree program. Obviously, so that would be a total of $37,500. The cost is the same for each class, whether or not you are doing the formal tax program or whether you're doing one of our certificate programs or open enrollment as a degree seeker. So open enrollment is an option for students who may be seeking just to expand their personal knowledge or maybe can't get their application in time before the deadline. So their transcript didn't arrive in time. So we can admit you through open enrollment to take that one class. If you're a degree seeker, the cost is the $1,250. If you're a non-degree seeker and simply want to audit the class, there is a 30% discount from that tuition cost. If you take a class from a different program, and you can take one class outside of the tax program, for instance, in accounting or maybe in the MBA program, it may reduce or increase the cost of tuition just a bit. But other than tuition, there are very few other fees that are assessed in any of our programs. We do have an $85 tech fee for that's only charged in the terms in which you attend. There are very few classes now that actually use a textbook. So very few textbook fees. As Eric mentioned earlier, the program is predominantly relies on the code and the regs, and we give you access to CCH and RIA checkpoint. So you'll have that. Typically, when you submit your application, there is a $65 application fee for the formal degree program, lesser fees for the certificate and open enrollment. But as a way of thanking you today for attending our webinar info session, for those of you who have not already submitted your application, we are going to send you a waiver code when we send you a link to this recording. And you can utilize that application fee waiver code in submitting your application, so you won't have to pay the fee. There are various ways of financing your degree if you're not going to pay for it out of pocket. Typically, our tuition is due at some point within the first 3 weeks of each term. So if you're not paying directly out of pocket, please know that our program, the formal Master's in Tax program, does qualify for federal financial aid if you qualify for it. So we ask students to initiate that process by submitting their FAFSA form. Again, this slide will give you the web address to do that. We also have a terrific financial aid office that will work very closely with you in helping you go through that process. There is an additional form that needs to be completed and submitted directly to GGU. It's one of GGU's forms, and that one is found on our website. In addition to federal financial aid, there are also need and merit-based state aid opportunities. Golden Gate itself has scholarship and grant opportunities, not only for newly admitted students, but even more so for continuing students. There is a special welcome scholarship opportunity for F1 students, international students who come to the United States to study full-time in one of our programs. And then one of the opportunities that I like to point out in particular is our alumni referral grant. So if you know somebody who has graduated from Golden Gate University and referred you to our program, we have a very short alumni referral grant form that can be filled out by that individual who's an alum of our program or alum of the institution. They would fill that out for you, then you would automatically receive $1,000 tuition reduction off of your first class. If anybody here is military, you may have seen on a prior slide, we do have the Helen Diller Center for veterans. We have been a proud participant in the Yellow Ribbon program and have strong military support system at GGU. At the Diller Center, we have people who can assist you in coordinating the forms and documentation that you need, not only from the military, but also from Golden Gate, and coordinating that, as well as helping you to understand what you need to qualify for full or partial housing benefits, and also the amount of tuition that'll be covered depending on how many classes you take and how to structure that. So at the end of the day, for our military folks, your tuition and out-of-pocket expenses could be virtually zero. There are other options too, as far as private and alternative loans. I have had, I don't want to be a advertiser for anybody or any company in particular, but I have had students tell me that they have been successful in obtaining loans from other sources as well. We also have what we call an employer reimbursement program. So if your employer is going to pay for or subsidize a portion of the tuition for you, we encourage you to work with our student accounting services office. They will coordinate payment with you and your employer to minimize the out-of-pocket exposure to you in the tuition payment. So I know some employers may require the student earn a certain grade before they'll cover it, but we work with you to structure that. As far as our terms go, Golden Gate operates on a trimester system. So we have 3 15-week terms. Our summer term just started at the beginning of May, and it will end in August. We go into our fall term, which starts in September and goes until December, and our spring term, which starts in January and goes until April. And I know, for those of you who do have busy season, which I don't know, nowadays it seems that busy season happens at least once in every term. So in addition to our 15-week classes, we do offer 5 and 7.5-week accelerated classes that are scheduled so that they don't conflict with busy season. And that enables students to take classes in each term should they choose to do that. It is okay. We provide a lot of flexibility to our students. So it is okay if you need to skip a term because, you know, your job or summer vacation or something isn't going to permit you to attend in a particular term. But if you do want to take classes and you don't want to commit to the 15 weeks, you can commit to a part of term and take an accelerated class to sort of help you continue getting through the program at a more expedited pace. When accepting applications, we don't have a deadline per se. We do accept them on a rolling basis. And so your application is considered as it is received. We do give priority consideration to those applications that are received no later than 15 business days before the start of the term. Registration usually happens a couple of months before the term begins. So if you want the best choice of classes, or if you want to register early, then I encourage students to get their applications in early because we will work with you to get you registered as soon as possible. I think that's about it on my end. And this is my contact information. So if nothing else, if you want to take go right to the very last slide when you receive this recording, please do. And I'm happy to answer any questions that maybe weren't answered in this presentation. Or if you didn't feel comfortable asking a question now as we move into the question and answer section, I'm happy to speak with you individually.
So we do encourage you guys to ask the questions now. So the way I'd like to do it, if you do have a question and you can and you feel comfortable, please just enable your webcam. And when I can see you, I'll call on you and we'll answer your question. If for some reason you do not want to enable your webcam and you want to just ask the question via the chat, feel free to go ahead and type your question into the chat. So looks like Marina may have a question. There it is. Okay. Hi, Marina.
Hi. So yes, you mentioned that you were working full-time while working on your master. So I was wondering how do you do that? Because that would be my case where I would not cut short my work hours. So would it be feasible? And then how many classes were you taking?
Yeah. Okay. So all great questions. So if you take a class in a 15-week format, my estimate is 10 to 12 hours a week. That's all inclusive. That's including class time. That includes prepping time. That includes studying for the exam. That includes everything. Now, some people will tell you it's less and some people will tell you it's more, but I think that's a reasonable estimate. So for me, I was working 55-hour weeks during the spring busy season and 42 to 44-hour weeks during the summer and the fall. So I never took a class during busy season, and I took a class during the other 2 semesters. So it took me 5 years. So that's just now. Do I know people that took 2 classes during the non-busy season? Yes. Question of how much of a life would you like, right? Because for me, after coming off working 55-hour weeks, I didn't want to work 60-hour weeks, right? Between work and school. So I never was interested in taking 2 classes at a time when I worked full time. Absolutely. I know students who are taking classes now that do that. I think they're crazy, but that's what they do. And they did well in the class. They just had to work really hard. So it depends now. What's great, what Cindy told you about is we have these classes which are outside of busy season, you know, that are offered. Just be careful because if it's accelerated, it's probably more than 10 to 12 hours during that period of time because it's having like multiple classes or long classes in a given period of time. So it's just a function of how much you're willing between and how much outside of work and school you have, right? Of your own personal time or family commitments or whatever. I'll let Cindy get in on this, but my suggestion is use that as a rule of thumb, and then take a class and decide. You may decide, Eric's crazy, I can get through this just 6 hours a week. Or Eric's crazy, it actually takes me 15 hours a week. And then decide what kind of works best for you. Cindy, anything to add?
No, I would just say, a lot of that is very personal. It depends just on what you have going on. It depends on what your experience is in your background. I mean, you may have a more in-depth background in a particular area of tax where things are a little bit more familiar to you and easier to learn. And so it'll just depend on the class. But again, we do try to, we tell students who are working full-time, one class at a time, 2 tops. But there are ways to structure it, especially with the accelerated classes, where if you wanted to take 2, you could do that, and maybe it only doubles up for half the term. So, so there are ways to get through it. At the end of the day, it's not about how fast you get through the program, right? It's really just learning how to do this. And so I don't push people to go through it quickly.
Yeah. But for example, what we did not have when I took classes here is like we offer a Saturday seminar, 5 straight Saturdays in like January and very beginning of February for tax procedures. And a very popular professor who has a high position on the IRS. I forgot what position he has there, but regardless, so that's an example where previously I would never have taken a class in the spring, but that class is doable as long as you don't have an early busy season. If you start to get busy like in February as opposed to January, that works pretty well.
Thank you.
Sure. Did anyone else have any other questions? I don't think I see anything in the chat. Don't be shy. There's no bad questions. And again,
RuPaul.
Yes, go ahead, RuPaul.
Hi, so I was just wondering, what would be, I guess, the pros and cons or the differences between getting this master's versus just going straight for like a US CPA?
A US CPA, did you say?
Yeah. Like
Okay.
CPA.
Cindy, you want me to take this or did you want to first crack?
Why don't you start?
Okay,
first,
sure.
and then I'll-
So what I was always told growing up is all of the above, right? Of that one, right? I'm a CPA and a master's in tax. Now, as someone who did both, I would say the title was always very important in my development when I went out, when people represented me as like on a sales call, as a manager, I was a CPA. The title helped me a lot. The fact that I was a CPA, the fact that I passed the CPA exam, almost zero, to be honest with you. I mean, I studied real hard to pass that exam, and I studied to pass the exam, and almost all the stuff I learned, I quickly since forgot. The master's in tax, I would say, was less important than the CPA, although important, but it wasn't paraded around as much that I had a master's in tax. It was listed. But I got to tell you, the information, the knowledge I gained from master's in tax, I used every day and was far more valuable than a CPA. So if I were to go back in time and say, Eric, which you only could have one, everyone would told me I had to do both, but if I only could have one, it would definitely be the master's in tax because of the actual information learned and knowledge that I actually used. It would have been a problem at KPMG because they were told me that to make manager, they wanted someone to be either a CPA or have a law degree. So that would have been a problem. Okay. But I couldn't imagine being an effective manager without the master's in tax, even though I don't believe they required it.
Okay, because I guess for my personal situation, and I don't know if you've seen this before, but I'm a Canadian CPA. Like, I've written my exams, I'm doing my practical. So I'm just trying to figure out if I should go for the master's or if I should pursue, a state CPA.
Do you Cindy, you probably have known this more than me in talking with them about when you have someone from Canada. The question I would have, I mean, everything in our master's in tax is focused on US federal tax law. So to the extent that you are not using US federal tax law, I wonder how valuable the all of the general courses in the master's in tax program are for you. But to the extent that you have client base or people that you're dealing with US tax law, that is the master of tax program. That will really be helpful. Cindy, I want to get you in on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, so a lot of the students that we have from Canada, they do cross-border tax, and they work both on the individual and corporate sides with, US individuals or institutions. They really, and the other thing about it, master's in tax, because our program is a more experiential law-based program and we teach you actually how to do this, then it doesn't matter that in the United States, maybe another year or two from now, something's going to change. You will still know how to do that. So, it's a skill set as opposed to just a credential after your name. For the US CPA exam, in order to get your licensure and everything, you do need to meet certain educational requirements. And so our classes do count toward that as well.
Okay. Because I think how it works is once you're a Canadian CPA, it's just you have to write the QX exam. It's just one transitional exam. And I don't think you need to go through the entire process as an American starting from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess the other question I had is, I know you talked a little bit about, you've seen Canadians having to deal with cross-border transactions. So do you suggest that they go and get work experience before doing the master's then? Because for me, I don't have any experience, but that's somewhere I'm trying to take my career. So do you think it's better to get work experience and then do the master's, or do the master's? What kind of order would you suggest?
I have a strong opinion on this. You do not need to have work. It's not important to have work experience before your master's. What's more important is the ability to get work experience shortly after or during you do the master's, because I have found adult learners, regardless of what the topic is, if we don't apply what we learn, we forget it. I just think I have nieces and nephews, and I look at their high school stuff, and I was like, I can't help you with that. I know I used to know calculus at one time. I can prove to you I had an A+ in it, but I don't have the first knowledge of it because I haven't used it at all. So what would be a real shame is if you took a class and then 3 years and then you had the work experience on the class. So I would say it isn't critical to have work experience. I'm agnostic of that. You have work experience before, it's fine, or not. But what's more important is that somewhat soon after you take a particular class, like within a year, you apply it. Otherwise, I don't think it matters before. I think it matters after. Cindy?
Yeah, and I'll just add as well, we can help you with that, right? As part of our program, you can take up to 6 credits, which is the equivalent of 2 elective classes as an internship. And even though you're in Canada, we do have a vast alumni network. And, we can help you do that as part of your curriculum, to get that work experience, which in some cases may turn into a full-time job opportunity or at least a starting point, but in any event would get you the experience of applying the skill sets that you're learning.
Every class I teach, I have students who have no experience, and then I have students who have a lot of experience. So which I think is great to have that diversity of experience. You get different questions. I'm looking at the clock. It's 1:02. Cindy, are you okay staying on a little longer? But I want to be respectful of your guys' time. To the extent you got what you needed out of today and you need to head out, no offense at all, please feel free to do so. But Cindy, I will stay on. I know a number of folks haven't asked a question. Don't forget, you can just type it in the chat if or just unmute your mic if you, even if you don't want to enable your webcam, and just ask verbally the question. But we'll stay on. But if you need to head out, that's fine. Don't need to announce it. Have a good rest of your day. Watch out for the email that'll come. Where will it come from, Cindy? Will it come from you or
It comes directly from me, and you'll get it within the next 24 hours.
Okay, and you get that waiver code. So don't apply yet. Wait till you get that waiver code so you can save the 65 bucks. Marina, did you have a follow-up question, or you're good?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
I wonder, I would be taking classes in Seattle, so I wonder if all of the classes will be available. And I would love to have an in-person experience rather than online. I wonder if the classes will be available.
So yeah, that's a trend. We're still in transition with that because of COVID. So not all of them are available. I do think that 5-week class, I know that Professor Paxson, he alternates between the Seattle campus and the San Francisco campus. There are a few classes that are taught. I just have to find out for sure when we're going to reopen that campus, but not all the classes are available on campus in the Seattle, but usually that classroom will be made available to the students who want to come, and the professor may be via Zoom, but the students may be in the classroom as well. So kind of a reverse.
I want to be clear about something when you say as opposed to online, because I think it's pretty clear that we will, for required classes, I can't guarantee every elective, but every required class will have a synchronous option for you. So to be 100% honest with you, Marina, I don't think anybody, even the president of the university, can predict what's going to happen a year from now, because we don't know what. I know that the plan now is to start the process of opening up our different campuses. But the one thing that I can guarantee you is you will have a synchronous option. You will be able to have an option where you meet live at a specific day and time, and it'll be very much like this, talking in real time, being able to ask questions. And we will always, for those that want the other alternative, there will always be an asynchronous option where you're watching videos and you're participating via the discussion forum. And you don't have, throughout the program, you can switch those. Like I've had a student who said, I like the synchronous option, but they were literally traveling all over the place and they did not want to commit to being anywhere at a certain date and time. So they said for that term, they otherwise would have had to take the term off, but they wanted to keep going. So they took the asynchronous option.
And Marina, yeah, regardless of where you're taking the class from, when we do the synchronous option, when you zoom in, you're not only seeing people like this in little boxes via Zoom, but you'll also be able to see the students who are physically in the classroom. If it's, for instance, at our San Francisco campus, you'll see those students in there. You'll see the professor, you'll see the whiteboard. It very much feels like you're in a classroom. And, are you one of the professors who does a flipped classroom where you rely a lot on discussion?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You cannot lead a classroom and sit there and lecture for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are, you will lose people's attention. It was awkward to me, to be honest, that I lectured today for 45 straight minutes. I don't ever do that. My class, I lecture, then discussion, lecture, then discussion. So and the discussion is always on what I just lectured on. So that's the best way to learn. I want to make sure I see Emily's unmuted. Emily, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Marina, did we address your questions?
Yes, and if I can make my last comment.
Sure.
So I graduated in 2011. I work in accounting always, but I just recently joined the tax preparation course. Recently, it's been 2 years. So I remind myself the rules. I have to go to the books and take some classes and get back on learning again because I didn't use tax knowledge until now. So I forgot completely what that was all about. So now I'm kind of back in the game, but still it's a kind of baby steps in the whole universe of taxation. So I wonder if the master is the right step for me, or it would be too advanced for me to kind of follow it. I'm constantly reading everything,
Yeah.
but I wonder if I should do something prior to that.
Well, so I can speak from experience. I took the master's in taxation. When I started the firm, they said, Eric, pass the CPA exam first. So I passed the CPA exam 6 to 9 months. So 9 months of experience, I started the tax program of tax experience. So yes, it absolutely can be done. I have students, we have a program called a cohort program where people come in who are like career changers. Not only did they not have any tax experience, they didn't have any accounting experience. Now, is it more challenging for someone who has no experience versus someone who does have experience? Yes, they have to probably work a little harder. But I can tell you, people who have little experience do well in my classes all the time. And sometimes people who have a lot of experience don't do well because they think, oh, I got this, and they don't work at all. So yeah, I don't. It's kind of your similar answer to your previous question, that you don't need experience to do well. But my great suggestion to people is that they are applying it shortly after they do it. Sounds like you're working. It's great. I mean, I did that. I worked and I took the program. Yes, it was hard because I was working 45 hours a week during the non-busy time and taking classes, but it was great for my retention because what I learned on Tuesday, I was seeing in practice on Thursday, and I was able to practice.
Right.
So Cindy?
Oh, I just was going to add that very first class, that tax research and decision-making class, you'll start using that as soon as you take the class. That will help you be more effective and efficient in the work that you're trying to do on your own now. That class alone.
Yes. And that is funny. Yeah, that's funny because that is an area, you give feedback after the busy season. What can we do, or what areas can we cover as a team to kind of be more efficient? And I actually asked somebody to cover research because I feel that that's not my stronger suit.
Yeah.
How to do research, how to interpret the rules. So that first class is going to be great.
Right. And in the program, you talked about you do a lot of reading, or can you do a lot of reading? Yes, there isn't a reading component of the program, but I think adults learn by doing. So it's right off the bat with tax research about getting in there and doing research and case studies and actually doing it. Struggling maybe at first, but making mistakes and learning from the mistakes. And so yeah, no, I think the determination of when to get it is do you have the time in your life to dedicate 10 hours? If you don't, I'd say hold off until you feel like you can dedicate 10 hours a week, a later semester. And when do you think that you'll be able to apply what you learn in the near future? And if you're currently working in tax, that's not an issue. You're going to apply it. But the other thing to keep in mind is, you say, well, I don't have much experience. Well, you do have some experience. You have two years. But secondly, you'll have in your second and your third class, you have the experience of taking those previous classes. So I just want to make a real quick thing. Brandon, June, and Emily, you guys are all good? No questions? I want to make sure you feel like you weren't ignored here. Brandon?
No questions for me.
Okay, great. And sounds like June and Emily are good.
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Marina, you said that was your last question, but just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
That
I
was
want to
it.
make sure. It was great to meet all of you. I wish you guys well in your journey, and maybe one day down the future, who knows, I'll see you in a GGU class. Cindy, any final things before we wrap up?
No, just keep an eye out for an email from me later today or early tomorrow.